It was supposed to be just another quiet Saturday in Ashford Park. The breeze was gentle. Children's laughter floated through the air like music. Couples strolled along brick paths lined with tulips just beginning to bloom. A man walked his golden retriever past the fountain. A woman sipped her latte on a nearby bench. Nothing unusual, nothing loud, just life unfolding, soft and ordinary. Until her voice shattered everything. "Get that boy out of the park, right now." Heads turned. Conversations froze. Even the birds seemed to fall silent. The words weren't just loud, they were sharp, slicing through the calm like a blade. Standing near the playground was Rebecca Collins, a woman in her early 50s with a designer cardigan wrapped around her shoulders and a scowl that made the air feel colder. Her manicured hand pointed, unwavering, at a young black teenager sitting alone on a bench near the oak trees. The boy hadn't moved. He wasn't talking. He wasn't doing anything but quietly scrolling on his phone. But to Rebecca, his presence alone was unacceptable. Her voice grew more frantic. "He's been here for over an hour, watching. Lurking. Just sitting there, pretending like he belongs. This park is for families." Gasps fluttered across the nearby benches like wind-rustling paper. Parents pulled their children a little closer. Some just stared, others looked down, unsure of what to do. But no one said a word. The boy, Marcus Bennett, looked up in confusion, unsure if she was talking about him, unsure why she was talking about him. He didn't flinch. He didn't run. He just sat there, blinking at the woman with a kind of dazed disbelief. His phone was still in his hand, resting on his thigh. His earbuds dangled loose around his neck. He looked no older than 15. Marcus had been coming to this park every Saturday afternoon for years. It reminded him of his childhood. It reminded him of quiet moments waiting for his mom after class. He liked the stillness here. The smell of the grass, the way the sun made the leaves shimmer above him, but now the air had changed. Rebecca was already dialing 911. "Yes, I need to report someone suspicious in Ashford Park. He's alone. He's been watching people. I don't feel safe." Her voice was steady now, practiced, like she knew exactly what buttons to press, what tone to use. Marcus stayed perfectly still, just like his mother taught him. Because when you're a young black teen in America, even stillness is survival. And yet somehow, even that was too much. Marcus Bennett didn't hear the sirens yet. He was still sitting there, elbows resting on his knees, fingers loosely wrapped around his phone. His hoodie was navy blue, sleeves pushed up to the elbows. His backpack, worn but clean, sat beside him on the bench. Nothing about him was loud. Nothing about him demanded attention. He wasn't staring at anyone. He wasn't talking to anyone, just quietly waiting, the way he always did. This was routine. Marcus was 15, an honor student, quiet. Observant. The kind of kid teachers praised for maturity beyond his years. He loved chess. He read Malcolm X and Maya Angelou before most of his classmates had finished the Hunger Games. And every Monday, Wednesday, and Saturday afternoon, he waited here at Ashford Park for his mom to pick him up after study group. It was their meeting spot, neutral ground between school and court. The one place they both agreed felt safe, but today, it didn't feel safe anymore. Across the path, Rebecca Collins pressed her phone to her ear, speaking in that carefully calibrated voice. The one that carried just enough urgency to be taken seriously, but not enough to sound panicked. The kind of tone that made dispatchers lean in, the kind of tone that, historically, got young black boys like Marcus hurt. "Yes, I'd like to report someone suspicious," she said. "He's been sitting on that bench for over an hour, watching people. He doesn't look like he belongs here. I don't feel safe. There it was. Not threatening, not armed, just doesn't look like he belongs. A vague accusation soaked in certainty. And on the other end of the call, someone was already typing in the report. Marcus glanced up. He could feel her eyes. He could feel the shift in the air. The way people were starting to glance at him sideways. The way strollers slowed down just a little as they passed. He didn't know exactly what had happened yet, but he knew the look. Every black boy in America knows the look. It was the one that made you hyper-aware of your body, of where your hands were, of how fast you were breathing. It was the look that turned presence into danger, silence into resistance, stillness into suspicion. He sat up straighter, slipped his phone into his pocket. He folded his hands on his lap, his fingers trembling just slightly. He remembered what his mother always said, "If anything ever happens, stay calm. Keep your hands visible. Speak clearly. Never raise your voice. Never run." Her voice echoed in his head, and he took a deep breath. But deep down, a quiet panic was growing. Because his mother, Olivia Bennett, wasn't just any mom. She was a federal judge, a sharp, commanding voice in the Northeast Circuit Court. A woman whose decisions had reshaped state law, whose photo had been featured in The Atlantic, who had once sentenced a sitting mayor for corruption and had done so with grace, firmness, and zero fear. She had told Marcus he could be anything, but she had also told him the truth. No matter what you achieve, baby, some people will only see your skin. You could be holding a violin or a weapon. To them, it won't matter. And now, Marcus understood exactly what she meant. Rebecca was still talking. He couldn't hear the words anymore, but he could see her pointing, this time at her phone, as if showing proof that she'd done her civic duty. Her face looked proud, almost satisfied, like she'd just prevented a disaster, like she'd saved someone. But Marcus wasn't a threat. He was just a kid waiting for his mother, and the police were already on their way. The first sound was a siren, then another, then a third. It didn't build slowly. It cracked the air open, 3 distinct screams hurtling through Ashford Park, like the park itself had called for backup. The red and blue lights chased away the afternoon calm, splashing across swings, picnic tables, and startled faces. Joggers froze mid-stride. Parents clutched their children. Conversations vanished like breath on glass. And in the center of it all sat Marcus Bennett, motionless. He had seen this scene before, not in real life, but on phones, on news clips, on TikToks gone viral for all the wrong reasons. It was never subtle, never graceful. It always started the same: the lights, the shouting, the rush, and then the silence that followed, thick and coiled like something waiting to strike. So he did the only thing his mother had ever drilled into him. He kept his hands where everyone could see them. Palms open, elbows still, no sudden movements, no reaching. No blinking too fast. He didn't speak, he didn't stand. He just sat, visible, careful, black, and waiting. The 3 police cruisers screeched to a halt in a triangle formation around him, tires spitting gravel, doors flung open. Hands hovered near holsters. One officer gripped a baton with the tension of someone preparing for impact. Another adjusted his radio mic like it was a weapon. And then came the voice. "Step away from the bench. Now." It belonged to Sergeant Dale Hale, a broad-shouldered man in his late 40s with mirrored sunglasses that hid his eyes but not his assumptions. He had the presence of a man who expected compliance before explanation. He moved like the world had confirmed his suspicions too many times. Marcus didn't move. He couldn't. "Sir," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'm just waiting for my mom." But they weren't listening. Not really. 2 officers flanked him without a word, one to the left, one behind. They didn't draw weapons, but they didn't need to. Their body language did it for them. One of them reached toward Marcus's bag. The other circled as if Marcus might bolt, despite the boy still being seated, still silent, still holding nothing. "I told him to leave!" Rebecca Collins shouted from behind them, her voice rising like a triumphant anthem. "I told him this park wasn't safe for people like that to just be loitering around." He refused. "I had no choice but to call. I had to protect everyone." She wasn't crying. She wasn't shaking. In fact, she looked oddly proud, like she had just done her civic duty. Like she'd prevented a mass tragedy by confronting a teenager with a backpack. And in that moment, Rebecca Collins became the most dangerous person in the park. Not because she had power, but because she knew how to wield her whiteness like a badge. Sergeant Hale turned to her and nodded solemnly, as if to say, "You did the right thing, ma'am." Then he looked back at Marcus. "You got ID?" Marcus shook his head. "I'm 15, sir. I don't have—" "Don't lie to me," Hale cut in, voice sharp. "You don't get to lie when we're called out here." It wasn't a conversation. It was a performance, the kind that's rehearsed in systems, replayed in courtrooms, and recorded far too often on cell phones. Marcus swallowed hard. In his mind, he counted 1, 2, hands visible, 3, 4. Breathe. A few bystanders began filming, slowly, carefully. Not intervening, not yet, but watching. Because they'd seen enough to know how these things could end. And just when it felt like Marcus might be the next headline, a sound roared down the road. A black sedan was tearing into the parking lot like a judgment. The kind of sound that meant something bigger was coming. And someone was about to find out exactly who Marcus Bennett was. The black sedan sliced into the parking lot like a blade through silk. No screeching tires, no frantic honking. Just a swift, deliberate arrival that cut through the chaos with silent authority. The officers turned first, their shoulders stiffening. Rebecca Collins hesitated, her phone still clutched like a victory flag. Even Marcus looked up, uncertainty flickering across his face, until he saw the door open, and out stepped Olivia Bennett. She didn't slam the door. She didn't rush. She walked and measured, her heels clicking softly against the pavement and her coat flaring slightly in the breeze. Her presence was quiet, but it didn't need volume. It carried the weight of courtrooms and verdicts, of gavels dropped like thunder. Her hair was pulled back in a smooth, no-nonsense bun. Her blazer was black, tailored, crisp. But it was her eyes, sharp, unblinking, and cold as tempered glass, that made the park go still. Sergeant Hale took an involuntary step back. He didn't know who she was yet, but his instincts told him something had shifted. Something dangerous had entered the scene, not with fists, but with facts. Olivia didn't look at him. She didn't look at the other officers either. Her gaze went straight to Marcus. "Are you all right, son?" The boy nodded slowly, his voice catching in his throat. "I didn't do anything, Mom. I was waiting." "I know," she said, soft enough only for him to hear. Then she turned and looked directly at Rebecca Collins. No shouting, no theatrics. Just a look, the kind of look that comes before a courtroom crumbles. The kind of look that makes lies wither on contact. Rebecca opened her mouth, probably to defend herself, to explain, to throw out another thinly veiled concern for safety. But Olivia raised a hand, not aggressively, not forcefully. Just firmly, a quiet gesture of finality, as if to say, "You've said enough." Then, for the first time, Olivia Bennett addressed the officers. "My name is Judge Olivia Bennett," she said. Her voice was steady, each syllable clipped with precision. "I serve as a federal judge in the Northeast Circuit." She paused, then pointed at Marcus. "And this young man is my son." The words hit like a gavel. The silence that followed was not polite. It was charged, the kind that hangs over a courtroom just before the verdict, the kind that leaves no room for excuses. Sergeant Hale blinked. One of the younger officers coughed awkwardly. Rebecca froze. There it was. The sudden collapse of certainty. The woman she had dismissed as just another mother now stood before her, cloaked in power, in law, in unflinching maternal rage wrapped in judicial restraint. "Now," Olivia said, shifting her body slightly toward the sergeant, "perhaps someone would like to explain to me why my son was surrounded by 3 police officers in a public park without cause or complaint." No one answered. Not yet, because no one had prepared for a protest this composed, this calculated, this devastatingly sharp. Olivia wasn't here to yell. She wasn't here to beg. She was here to hold people accountable. And no one was walking away from this unchanged. The silence after Olivia Bennett's declaration hung heavy. Not a sound from the officers, not a single excuse from Rebecca Collins. The wind, once steady through the trees, now felt like it had stopped mid-breath, waiting for what came next. And what came next wasn't rage. It wasn't shouting. It was something far more dangerous. Truth, delivered with the cold precision of a scalpel. Olivia turned slowly, eyes fixed on Sergeant Hale. "You said you responded to a report of suspicious behavior. What exactly was suspicious about my son sitting on a bench in a public park?" Hale opened his mouth, then shut it. His jaw clenched. He glanced at Rebecca, whose arms were now folded defensively across her chest. She was trying to hold her posture, still believing she had the moral high ground, still clinging to the illusion that she had done something noble. "He was loitering," Hale muttered. "Alone, no ID." And the caller expressed concern. Olivia's voice sliced through his explanation like glass. "Concern about what?" she snapped. "That a black boy was breathing too close to a swing set. That he wasn't flinching when people stared. That he had the audacity to exist in a space that you—" She turned sharply to Rebecca. "Decided wasn't meant for him?" Gasps echoed through the park. A small crowd had gathered now. Parents, teenagers, an older man with his dog. A teenage girl is still holding a melting ice cream cone, and a few, like before, held up their phones, recording what had begun as an incident and was now transforming into something much bigger. "Waiting for his mother on a bench," Olivia continued, "is now considered suspicious behavior." "Is that what we've come to?" She didn't shout. She didn't need to. Her words landed with the force of a gavel striking marble. Each sentence was deliberate, measured, sharpened like a legal brief meant not for the ears but for the conscience. Then she turned fully toward Rebecca. "This boy," she said, pointing firmly, "didn't do a damn thing wrong." Rebecca's face turned a shade paler. Her mouth opened but nothing came out. It wasn't his actions. It wasn't his tone. It wasn't his presence. It was your perception of his skin. The crowd held still. Even the children sensed something different was unfolding. Something they would talk about later, quietly, at dinner tables. Olivia took a step forward. "You weaponized your discomfort. You made a call to the police not because you saw a crime, but because you couldn't reconcile your idea of safety with the sight of a black teenager sitting quietly, alone." Rebecca finally found her voice. I was just trying to protect who?" Olivia's voice cut her off like a slap. Protect the public from what? A child scrolling through his phone? A boy with a backpack and a dream? Tell me, Rebecca, what exactly was the threat? Rebecca flinched. Her composure cracked. Her hand trembled as she lowered her phone. Her eyes darted to the cameras, the crowd, the officers, seeking refuge from a truth that refused to blink. When you chose to call the police, you weren't protecting anyone, Olivia said, her voice low and firm. You were perpetuating a lie, a dangerous one, the kind that gets people hurt. The kind that buries futures, the kind that turns boys into headlines. A pause. And then Olivia delivered the final blow, not with anger but with devastating clarity. You didn't see my son, you saw your fear, and you gave it a badge. No one moved. Not a single person. Even Sergeant Hale looked away, as if ashamed to stand in uniform and not speak. Somewhere in the back, a woman whispered, "She's right." And with that, the illusion shattered. The story Rebecca had tried to construct, of a concerned citizen, of a boy who didn't belong, collapsed under the weight of the truth Olivia Bennett had forced into the open. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a revelation. And no one watching would be able to unsee it. The silence didn't last long. It never does when truth has just been spoken aloud, when it's no longer hiding in the margins but standing in the center, fully exposed, daring people to look away. Olivia Bennett stood tall, her hands steady by her sides, her voice echoing across Ashford Park. Her son was safe, for now, but her fight was only beginning. She turned toward Sergeant Hale, her eyes like steel behind glass. "I want every detail," she said sharply. "The 911 call transcript. The recording, the full incident report, badge numbers. Body cam footage, if you had the foresight to turn it on." Hale shifted uncomfortably, the weight of his vest somehow heavier. "We can make those available through official channels, Judge Bennett." "No," she cut him off, firm and direct. "I'm not going through red tape to get answers about why my son was treated like a criminal. I want the footage, the audio, the dispatcher's name. This won't be filed and forgotten." Every syllable was a hammer on the system's door. A few feet away, a woman in her 70s stepped forward from the crowd. She had silver curls tucked under a sun visor and wore a t-shirt that read, "Vermont Strong." Her voice trembled, but not with fear, with conviction. "She's right," the woman said. "I've lived long enough to see too many moments like this brushed aside. Someone needs to speak up." That simple sentence, spoken in a voice cracked by age and experience, was all it took. The crowd seemed to exhale, as if someone had finally punctured the wall of passive observation. Phones went up again, cameras focused. Not just on Marcus now, but on Olivia, on Rebecca, on the officers who still didn't know where to look. Olivia pivoted, eyes sweeping the crowd. "Don't let this go quiet," she said, her voice rising not in anger but in rallying force. "If you saw it, say something. If you filmed it, post it. Don't whisper about racism at dinner tables and then look away when it unfolds in front of your face." She pointed gently, not accusingly, to those holding their phones. "Get on the record. Get on camera. Let people know what happened here today." Her words weren't just commands. They were an invitation to be part of a reckoning. Educate your neighbors, your kids, your friends. Because if this can happen to my son, who's done nothing wrong, who was waiting for me, who's never broken a single law, then it can happen to anyone. Marcus, still by the bench, watched her, wide-eyed. He had always known his mother was powerful, but this wasn't power in the courtroom. This was power in the open, unfiltered, unmasked, human, and unafraid. Rebecca Collins, now visibly rattled, tried to speak. I just didn't recognize him. I thought he was... I didn't mean... Olivia turned her head and with calm finality said, "You didn't need to recognize him. You just needed to respect him." The crowd murmured. Someone near the swings clapped once, slowly, intentionally. Others joined, not a cheer, not a celebration, but a signal. We see, we hear, we're not looking away. One man muttered under his breath, "Damn right." Olivia reached out and placed a hand on Marcus's shoulder. He stood a little straighter. "This won't end here," she said quietly to him, but loud enough for the crowd to hear. "I won't let it." She wasn't just a mother, not anymore. In that moment, she became a movement. And the park, once just a place of swings and benches, had become something else too. A place where silence had been broken, where bias had been called by its name, and where a community was beginning, slowly but surely, to wake up. By the time Olivia Bennett and her son returned home that evening, the sun had begun to dip beneath the Vermont hills, casting long amber shadows across the quiet streets of Burlington. But inside her modest colonial house, the light was still burning, bright, relentless, and focused. Olivia didn't pour herself a glass of wine. She didn't change out of her black blazer. She didn't even sit down at first. She went straight to the kitchen table, opened her laptop, and began typing. Every detail, every word, every expression. From the moment the first siren pierced Ashford Park to the last camera flash in the crowd, she captured it all, weaving facts with urgency, the kind only a mother and a federal judge could channel in the same breath. On March 18th, 4:12 p.m., she typed with the discipline of someone preparing for war, but this wasn't retribution. This was reconstruction. The kind of change that required pressure, persistence, and paper trails. Once the report was complete, 8 pages, meticulously formatted, she picked up the phone and called the Burlington Department of Justice. "This is Judge Olivia Bennett," she began, her voice clear and unwavering. "I'm reporting a racially motivated misuse of emergency services, and I'm demanding a formal investigation into the conduct of Sergeant Hale and the handling of the 911 call placed earlier today." There was no stutter in her voice, no room for delay. "I'm also requesting a formal meeting with your office and representatives from the Burlington Police Department. We need to talk about protocol and reform." 2 days later, that meeting happened. Inside a sterile City Hall conference room lined with municipal flags and dusty law books, Olivia sat across from the chief of police, a deputy city attorney, and 2 stone-faced police supervisors. On the table in front of her sat a printed copy of her report and a USB drive containing every available video clip from the park. The chief tried to open with pleasantries. Olivia cut him off. "Let me be clear. This isn't a courtesy visit. This is an intervention." She leaned forward, her fingers steepled. "I'm not here to discuss reputations. I'm here to demand accountability." She laid out her case like she was in court. The racial profiling of Marcus, the reckless escalation by responding officers, the complete absence of any meaningful de-escalation, and the dangerous precedent of allowing biased 911 calls to dictate armed response. "Your department is training its officers to respond to fear, not facts," she said coldly. "That ends today." Then she delivered her terms. Mandatory racial bias training for all officers, an overhaul of 911 intake procedures, including protocols for flagging calls driven by profiling, and a formal review board involving civilian oversight for future incidents of alleged discrimination, because the next child this happens to might not have a mother with a gavel, and a voice the system respects. There was silence on the other side of the table. The chief of police sighed deeply. "We'll need time to review." "You don't have time," Olivia interrupted. "You have a city already watching, and now you have a movement forming." And she was right. That same night, the first video clip from the park, just 48 seconds long, hit 2 million views on TikTok. By morning, it was on Twitter, then Instagram, then local news. It showed Olivia stepping out of her car, speaking calmly, pointing directly at Rebecca Collins and declaring her son innocent. The caption read, "Black boy harassed in park." His mom? A federal judge. The story spread like wildfire. By the end of the week, community groups in Burlington were in the streets. Not with rage, not with violence, but with signs, chants, and statements of resolve. Change starts here. Silence is complicity. This park belongs to all of us. Local pastors spoke at vigils. School teachers formed reading circles for kids to talk about racial injustice. Youth groups staged sit-ins outside City Hall. And through it all, Olivia stayed the course. Not as a public figure, but as a mother who had drawn a line in the sand and refused to step back. She hadn't asked for this battle, but she sure as hell wasn't going to lose it. It didn't end with a press conference. It didn't end with applause. It ended in a beige community center basement with folding chairs and fluorescent lights that flickered slightly when the air conditioner kicked on. This was not the place for spectacle. It was the place where consequences begin, quietly, awkwardly, and often far too late. Rebecca Collins sat in the third chair of the second row, wearing a plain gray cardigan and clutching a pen like it was armor. Her eyes were puffy. Her posture was small. She didn't look like the woman who had shouted in the park. She looked like someone trying to vanish. But Olivia Bennett and Marcus didn't come to let her. This session, organized by the Burlington Office for Social Equity, was part of a court-mandated community service agreement. Rebecca was required to attend a series of workshops on racial bias and harm reduction. But this was different. This one included the very people she had harmed. When Olivia and Marcus walked into the room, a hush fell over the circle. The facilitators stood to greet them, but Olivia only offered a small nod. She wasn't here for the ceremony. She was here for something harder. She was here for honesty. Marcus sat beside her, hands folded in his lap. His face was composed, but his eyes darted sideways, forward, downward. He wasn't afraid, but he wasn't at ease either. The room wasn't hostile, but it was watching. The facilitator began with an invitation. If anyone would like to share what brings them here today. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Marcus stood. His voice, when it came, was soft, unsteady at first, but clear. "I'm here because someone thought I didn't belong. I wasn't doing anything. I was just sitting, waiting for my mom." He paused, swallowed. "But that wasn't enough. I guess I didn't look right. I guess I was too quiet. Too black. Too something." His voice cracked slightly, but he didn't stop. "I shouldn't have to prove I'm allowed to exist. I shouldn't have to explain I'm not dangerous just to sit on a bench." There was no applause, no reaction, just stillness. And then, from the third chair in the second row, a sob broke the silence. Rebecca's shoulders shook. Her hands trembled. She stood barely. "I didn't mean to hurt you," she said, voice thick with tears. "I was scared, and I told myself I was protecting people. But I wasn't. I was just protecting my own fear." She wiped her eyes, looking straight at Olivia. You trusted this city with your child. And we failed you. Her gaze turned to Marcus. I failed you. The room held its breath. Olivia stood beside her son, not as a judge, not as a crusader, but as a mother. I don't want an apology, she said gently. I want a culture that doesn't teach people like you to fear people like him. She looked at Rebecca with neither contempt nor forgiveness. Just the truth. I just want my child to live in peace. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't loud, but it landed like thunder. Rebecca nodded through her tears. And in that moment, it became clear, this wasn't about guilt. It was about growth. About letting people sit in the discomfort they caused and still expecting them to rise from it. Later that night, on the way home, Marcus sat in the passenger seat. He was quiet. The kind of quiet that holds 1,000 thoughts. Finally, he asked, "Do you think she meant it, Mom? Do you think she'll change?" Olivia didn't look at him right away. She kept her eyes on the road. "I don't know," she said softly, "but I know we did our part." And sometimes, that's how it starts. Marcus nodded slowly, gazing out the window as the streetlights passed overhead. For the first time in days, he exhaled without fear, and somewhere deep inside, something loosened. Not because the world had changed overnight, but because he had spoken, and someone had listened. The story didn't fade when the headlines did. It lived on, in conversations, in classrooms, in awkward silences that finally got challenged. And in one particular high school auditorium on a rainy Thursday morning, it found new breath. Marcus Bennett stood on stage, clutching a note card with trembling fingers. The lights weren't bright, but the eyes staring back at him felt like spotlights. Freshmen. Sophomores. Teachers are in the back row. The principal is adjusting his tie. Even the janitor paused at the door. He cleared his throat. "My name is Marcus," he began. "And a few weeks ago, I sat on a park bench and waited for my mom." A pause. Some students shifted in their seats. Others leaned in. "That's it. That's what I did. But someone saw me and decided I was a threat." The auditorium was quiet now. "They didn't know my name. They didn't know I'm on the honor roll, or that I like chess, or that I want to be an architect someday." His voice steadied. "They just saw my skin, and they called the police." No one moved. "I was lucky because my mom showed up. She's a federal judge, and she knew how to speak so people would listen." He scanned the crowd, eyes landing on a kid in a hoodie like his, a teacher with folded arms. A girl near the aisle was quietly filming him on her phone. But not everyone has that. Not everyone gets a second chance just because someone powerful loves them. He took a breath, letting the words settle. "So I'm telling my story because silence protects the wrong people. And stories like mine, they happen every day. Just not always where a camera's rolling." When he stepped down from the podium, no one clapped. Not yet. The room just held the moment, like it knew clapping would feel too easy. Later that evening, Olivia met him in the kitchen. She didn't ask how it went. She didn't need to. She could tell by the way he moved, shoulders straighter, eyes clearer, that something inside him had shifted. She slid a plate of food across the counter and said, "You took a painful afternoon and turned it into the beginning of change." Marcus looked up, surprised. "Really?" She nodded. Change doesn't start in courtrooms. It starts on the benches and stages and classrooms, anywhere someone chooses to speak instead of shrink. He smiled faintly, and this time it wasn't guarded. That night, Olivia sat at her desk again, not to write a report, but to reflect. She had fought in many courts and issued rulings that made local news. But this? This was different. This wasn't just about policy or punishment. It was about a boy who found his voice and a system that had no choice but to listen. If you're still here, reading, watching, listening, then this is for you. If you ever see a child treated like Marcus was, don't look away. Don't tell yourself it's none of your business. Record it. Speak up. Stand with them, because silence protects injustice. And change doesn't come from institutions. It comes from people. People like Olivia, people like Marcus, people like you. So the next time you see something that feels wrong, don't just feel it. Do something, because change doesn't start in Washington. It starts with you.